Thank you for joining me for another quick hits conversation. Today, I would like to talk about how can you tell when you're happy? James, kick us off.
Oh, thanks. Happy is an interesting word because it encompasses so much. Like we could be talking about being a little bit better than ambivalent about your circumstances, all the way through to ecstatic delirium.
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose if we're talking about how can I tell, we're actually talking like at the lower end of that scale. You're not like singing "The Hills Are Alive" or anything like that, and you're not like
Maybe you just don't notice when you're
potentially.
happy. Yeah.
Yeah, well, if it is that, I'm sure the neighbours will be able to let you know. What came to my mind was the idea of resilience and your like mental currency. Uh, so at any point, like when we are under stress or placed under any sort of strain, be that a small thing at work or family issues, we have to spend some mental currency in order to work through or deal with that problem. I know if I'm happy because it feels in those moments like I have endless money to spend. Like the problems could just keep popping up and I could keep knocking them down like some bizarre psychological whack-a-mole. But if I am not happy, I find that currency, like I'm having to take out loans and I'm having to consider my spending and stuff like that. So psychologically, I just find my reserves, my ability to wield what you would call executive function is a lot sharper than it is if I'm even in the slightest bit unhappy or hungry. Often it's one of the other triggers for me.
Right.
Actually, I thought that this was not easy to think about this because my thoughts went to what is happiness all the time. What do I do? What do I... So coming to how do I know is really interesting. And I think it boiled down to I feel it in my body. There is a lightness in my body and an uprightness and a lightness in my body. And that's how I know I'm happy. I think I notice more than when I'm not happy than because happy should be the normal.
Right? Yeah.
I'm happy now.
And my brain went in, brain went in the direction of, is this a lot like how we treat health? Health is the absence of sickness. Happiness is the absence of distress. And I didn't get a whole lot further than that in my thinking on that idea. It's like, yes. And maybe that's a function of how I'm focused on the world. And I don't know whether that's a thing for other people that, oh no, I'm only thinking about happy when it's like, oh look, I'm not, thinking the physical side, I'm not hungry, I'm not in pain, I can move easily, right? None of the distress is showing up. So therefore I'm happy? At least neutral. I don't know how we get from neutral to happy.
And that begs the question, right? Do you notice that you're happy in the moment, or is it something that you either plan when I do XYZ thing, I'm going to be happy, or you look back and are like, oh, I was doing that thing and I was happy. Can you do it in the moment?
You mean, is it Schrodinger's mood?
Well, and being in flow, right? When you're in flow, that when things are just, you don't notice it till you're not. Because when you're in, you're so in. Is happiness like that?
Sometimes. And sometimes I really notice it in the moment, like in the choir, a really beautiful piece of music. And it's really lovely to produce this together. I can feel there and then that I'm happy.
What do you guys think?
I wonder if that's also an individual aspect, that different people notice it in different ways at different times. Because I'm definitely more of a after the fact. Or the flow analogy really fit for me because, I have to step out of it to notice that I'm in it.
It's interesting, the variance there between your responses. I wonder if there's an element of it that is a little like our sensation of temperature in our skin, and that it actually exists in comparison to something else. So for instance, when you're going into the choir, you've moved from another space, potentially from another mindset into this activity. And as you said, like before, when you mentioned your entire body, like that uprightness and the positivity, you then move into that space and your whole body goes, this is it, this is what I want, and then sort of hits you with the dopamine and the like. But if you existed in that space for a long period of time, would there be an element like the frog in the water, like you wouldn't notice it so much?
Yeah, I'm afraid I would.
I wonder.
Yeah, so that begs the question, do we need periods of unhappiness that we notice to then appreciate the periods of happiness to be able to notice?
Yeah.
And I definitely was questioning, does that mean that I'm perpetually in a happy state because I'm not noticing it or not?
Yeah, it's a deeper subject than it sounds when you ask the question. Go ahead, James.
Well, do you know what? I was going to link that back to something Wayne said earlier, the idea of it being like health. And I would imagine, Robyn, that towards the end of this, we're looking to get to what do you need to do to maintain that state. But your health doesn't just happen, does it? Like, even though it's the absence of any sort of ill feeling or malady, you have to take proactive steps in order to maintain good health. So you very likely have to take proactive steps to maintain happiness. And whether that is by creating those slight state changes, or whether it is through like planning and focused action, like let's say, for instance, Lena, you knew that you operated best and you felt best if you were getting to choir a couple of times a week, like you would be making sure you booked those in and moved things to make it happen. So potentially there's a link there, again, like very similar to the health, as Wayne mentioned earlier on in the video.
Yeah, so planning for happiness. And I've talked to some people for whom the act of creating the plan also brings happiness. Being able to think about, I'm going to do this, and that makes them happy.
I think there's research behind that planning makes you happy and prolongs the happiness. Maybe sometimes you're even more happy planning than the actual event.
It's true. Does happiness require a certain level of self-awareness and even self-efficacy?
I was pondering that I look at certain people and I go, they don't really seem happy. So that distance sometimes helps us see it in other people in ways that we don't necessarily see it in ourselves. So distance does feel like there's, at least from my perspective, I need that distance to say, oh yeah, yes, no. Again, paralleling the health side, the temperature in the room, I don't even pay attention until somebody's like, oh, it's cold. I'm like, oh yeah, it is. I hadn't even thought about it until now.
So how do we, and we only have like a minute left, but how do we notice happiness? What can we do to do a better job of noticing when we're happy in a moment? What would that look like?
Well, for me, since I feel it in the body, as far as I know, that's where I can put my attention. How's my body doing?
For myself, bringing it back to sort of the way that you think, looking at mindfulness, taking moments to stop and assess where you're at, like be it the body, be it any physical sensations, or be it, as we mentioned earlier, the absence of any stress, and then take any action as required.
Wayne, what about you? How do you notice? How are you going to do a better job noticing when you're happy?
And I'm leaning towards pushing back against that and saying, I don't want to notice. I just am going to take actions to move towards it.
Interesting. And how would you know if you're going to be successful at that if you're not going to notice if you're happy?
I don't know that I want to do that judging. I want to just keep moving in that direction because I feel like it's a directional goal, not a destination goal.
Fair. Well, that puts us at our 10 minutes. So that is a subject that is, we could go on and on for an hour, I'm sure. I appreciate you engaging in this with me. Thank you so much. And we'll do it again real soon. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.